Thank you, Aziza. And indeed, the idea of this final session, this 45 minutes that we have left, is to have a joint brainstorming on what could be the next step for the SDG localization in general, and also what OECD, in partnership with some key institutions like UN Habitat, the Local 2030, would like to do in the next year of our program and beyond. We had really many inputs and ideas in the 3 sessions that we had today. Of course, there is much more than these three topics. So what we would like to ask you is to have feedback and ideas on 3 main areas. The first one is in terms of thematic priority, that the movement of localizing the SDGs, again, beyond the OECD, will contribute with our program, but it's not just about our program, the brainstorming now. Which thematic priority we should focus on within these 3 thematic areas that we discussed today. So again, is a kind of takeaways from what the main messages emerge, and also beyond. So if you think there are really key topics that we didn't discuss, we didn't address during the roundtable, so please let us know. So the first group should be about the substance. The second is about joint action, concrete action that institutions like OECD, UN Habitat, Local 2030, the city, in the regions, the national government, and all the other institutions around the table should implement to speed up the process of achieving the SDGs at the local level. And the third one is about outreach, advocacy, and contribution to global events. The usual events like the high-level political forum, the Summit for the Future, the World Urban Forum that we discuss. As OECD and UN Habitat, we are also currently contributing to the G7 and G20. And in particular, in the G7, we are having a lot of discussion about achieving the SDGs at the local level. So these are the 3 thematic areas we would like to discuss. It's a very open and informal brainstorming. We have some technological support. It's not AI, but hopefully it's also useful to shape the discussion. And we would like to ask these 3 questions on Mentimeter, both to the people in the room and the participant online. So you can just scan this QR code with your phone. We'll give you a few minutes, a few seconds. And once this is done, still a few seconds to the team. Now we can move to the first question that we can show in the slide. So next slide, please. A Mentimeter. So the first question is again, for each of the 3 thematic areas discussed today, again, artificial intelligence to achieve the SDGs, financing the localization of the SDGs, and city-to-city partnership, decentralized development cooperation. Which key topic we should focus on for the next step of the SDG localization? And you should be able to propose, to suggest words in the Mentimeter. What I would like to do, given that maybe you need a bit of time to think about this response, is to open the discussion at the same in parallel. So any one of you that would like to have any suggestion, let's continue with the same approach. You raise your flag and you propose your ideas in terms of topics in this session, and then we'll move to the joint action and to the contribution to global event. We keep also the result in parallel, but it would be great to also have direct feedback from the participants. So here we can see capacity building that was mentioned many times, but in terms of financing, in terms of the use of AI, in terms of decentralized development cooperation, the role of artificial intelligence, financing again, that is emerging as one of the main. But again, feel free to raise your flags now and propose your ideas. Of course, we have some as OECD and UN Habitat, and we are going to share them with you. But the idea will be also to build on your inputs and your ideas. No one so far? Verena, please, from Bonn, City of Bonn.
Since I couldn't enter into the form, because it's too many words. I think strengthening local governance structures is an important point. And this is financing at the one hand side and maybe artificial intelligence, but what we see, for instance, in Germany at the local level, and I think somebody else mentioned this, I think it was the mayor of San Sebastian, who mentioned also staff resources and expertise. And looking at these things in common, what we see is that even if we have the will to strengthen local governance structures, what reality will show is that we have less funding, less staff, poorly developed artificial intelligence structures, but growing tasks. And how, as a local government, can we act as a knowledgeable organization in this context?
Thank you very much, Verena. Indeed, a very good point. And I will also see in the screen that there are many more inputs now. So anyone else that would like to take the floor? Javier? Please, Javier.
Thank you, Stefano. Well, yeah, but maybe building on the discussions before, yeah, and specifically also on capacity building, because, well, I think that this agenda requires really a new culture, a new systemic culture of collaboration, and that requires capacity building. I think that, yeah, I would think that investing in innovation for effectiveness in local governance in terms of using technologies, digitalization, also creating incentives for SDG acceleration, let's say public procurement policies, taxation policies that are incentivizing transformation and accelerating, coherent with the model that we want to transform. Also fiscal policies when it comes to budgeting, and also governance innovation to bring in together policy dialogues among all the stakeholders. It's not useful only to negotiate between the IOE, the unions and the government. We need all the stakeholders involved in try to co-create and the design of public policies in the long term. And then what Shipra was saying, with all this, you design long-term policies and you engage people. You create strong narratives with strong data so that you can be reliable and accountable for people, and also with the right information to start attracting finance. Finance in the ways, financiers, we were mentioned also this morning, need information, need the right information. And you need to provide the right taxonomies. That's very good that all the regulations in the EU, but not only, also the International Finance Sustainability Reporting Board is establishing new standards for companies to report on sustainability. Those data are very important to start, putting in place right information to address finance and investment into the local environments. So, but all that entails capacity building, new culture of collaboration and new innovation in local governance, but also in business making. And now that since we are talking also for civil society to start understanding that they need to jump in and be an accelerator of the transformation of organizations. They cannot only play the advocate side, which is crucial, but they also need to accelerate transformations within policy making and also within business transformations. There's a whole opportunity there. Business need also the knowledge of civil society when it comes to impacts in social and environmental specifically, and also academy. Academy need also to engage, to bring all this knowledge into joint definition of projects and policies. So when it comes, so just to take a bit of time back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Javier. Indeed, very good ideas. And also in the slide, I see that in particular, thinking about the session on AI, there are now inputs on understanding what AI is, local AI, collection of good practices. So perhaps for this thematic area, we still need to build the knowledge. And so, I don't know, a repository of good practice and desk research on what cities, regional government, and national government can do in terms of AI for sustainable urban development and SDG localization. Perhaps this could be one of the first steps. As OECD, you also saw when Aline presented our initial idea, we are thinking of maybe launching an accelerator for AI in city that will bring together all the different stakeholders working on AI, not only the public sector, of course, the private sector that often is more advanced on this topic than the public sector. So I think for this component, for this area of work, we should really start from maybe from the beginning. While for financing and decentralized development cooperation, there we have already a lot of knowledge. Perhaps it's more about creating the capacity and really moving towards the implementation. So maybe for this first question, I don't know if there is any other input. Javier, please. Javier, sorry.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Buenas tardes, arratsaldeon a todos. Brevemente, una cuestión que a nosotros nos preocupa es una cuestión que ha comentado antes Shipra, que es el relativo a la comunicación y a la participación ciudadana. Es un punto conflictivo de cara a futuro. O sea, lo que se ha comentado también antes.
Difficult issue for the future. As someone said before, there are populist movements, even those that deny the 2030 agenda. So we believe it is fundamental to have direct communication with the citizens so that they realize what Agenda 2030 really means and how SDGs at the end of the day tend and have the aim of improving the quality of life of all citizens. This is a concern for us, and I would link this with citizen participation regarding 2030 agenda. In the Basque experience, we've been able to align the interinstitutional efforts. We've also engaged the organized civil society, but the anonymous citizens, the citizens as a whole, the citizenship that is not organized, which is the great majority, is still further away from the 2030 agenda. So if we bear in mind this populist movement, we believe we need to communicate much more directly to citizens regarding SDGs and the 2030 agenda. And we honestly believe the OECD can contribute to this in a significant manner by generating and creating citizen participation models so that these citizens feel engaged with SDGs and the 2030 agenda. We believe that this is something very, very significant for the future.
So working on that in the framework of the pilot report that we are developing for the Basque country, how the 2030 agenda can be a tool for engaging the population, and at the same time how to institutionalize and socialize the 2030 agenda with the population beyond the government and the usual key actors. So definitely this is another priority that we can add to our roadmap. So I think if there are no other inputs, what we are going to do for this first question with the team is to try to group and connect this all the ideas that you gave us to the three thematic areas that we discussed today in the next step. As mentioned in the agenda, the idea is also to shape a roadmap, a thematic roadmap that where we are going to focus on in the next 2 or 3 years of our program, and a roadmap in terms of action. And this is, I think, a good transition to the next. Sorry, we have another question from the GRC. Please.
Well, not a question, just a very quick 5 cents, Stefano, on this very interesting work. Well, I will echo this citizen awareness issue, but I would further bring it into what we now call citizen ownership, not even participation, because there is a lot of participation washing around the SDGs, which is probably not enough if we are to achieve these goals. So the question here is how we reach this ownership. How do we ensure that the citizens actually own the SDGs? They feel part of the SDGs themselves, rather than this becoming, again, a top-down agenda.
Which brings me to my other very, very quick point, which is a little bit of an elephant in the room, which is on the effectiveness of governing at the local level by such broad global goals. So far, I'm afraid that the literature at least suggests that there has been very little transformative political impact of the SDGs at the regional and urban level. Practically what I say means that there has been very little integration, strategic and policy integration of these global goals and the agenda itself at the subnational level. So this is something that we should really, more of a horizontal issue that we should look on how these three items you very nicely touched today can also address these two issues, ownership on the one hand and how we govern by these global goals. Thanks.
Shipra.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. I do want to comment on this. And I also want to talk about one other piece. But first, responding on this, I think as you rightly said, the jury is still out. There is not, you can't say either way that there has been no transformative impact or little transformative impact of the global goals at the local level. With any concrete sort of data or evidence to back it up. At the same time, you can't say that it has had this profound impact, but the truth, I suspect, is somewhere in between. Many cities, 300, 400, 500 cities around the world have used the SDGs to define some part of their work, either to start collecting data using the indicators or to start looking at some kind of policy frameworks that respond or touch upon one or two of the SDGs that they find most relevant to them. As a holistic framework, I don't think we can expect any global framework to be translated into a governance model or framework at the local level. A lot of the targets are also not directly, translatable to the local level. A lot of the indicators need a lot of work and have needed a lot of work, which we have worked with partners on, both the urban monitoring framework, degree of urbanization, to actually start defining some of these targets, indicators, and frameworks and localizing them. So I don't, I think the truth is slightly more nuanced than that. But I do believe that the more data we collect, for example, through the VLRs and through the voluntary subnational reviews, the more we will be able to say with conviction which is the direction that the application or the implementation of the global goals is taking. Now, my second point relates to the translation of Azier's point as well, the direct communication, your point, citizen ownership, of the SDGs at the local level. And even if governments don't directly say to their populations that they are pursuing the SDGs, when you're accelerating access to water, to sanitation, to housing, to public space, to transport, that is what you are doing. I think the point is to make effective connections between everyday life of citizens and how it is improved and the global agendas, and say basically they are the same thing. We're not adding a function. We are improving our delivery of basic services and improving your quality of life and improving your access and reporting on it also against the SDGs. So I think we need to make sure that narrative is connected adequately. My final point on that, on how to build a societal movement and citizen ownership, our experience is that we need to really target the youth. Young people are the ones who are engaging on these issues, who are fighting for these issues. We thought that they have become cynical and agnostic, but we're seeing movements around peace, around climate, around resilience in many countries around the world. And I think really that cohort is our vehicle to accelerate and advance change. UN Habitat has a program around Youth 2030. which is around building young people's engagement in voluntary local reviews and Agenda 2030. I think we need a bit more concerted effort. So if I were to add, to the mix of the topics that we have on the table, Stefano, I think we would really look at how to target and engage young people in order to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. That is the key, finally. And that is the pill against cynicism that we are seeing around the world in respect of the global agendas, the UN, and the global governance system.
Super. Thank you so much, Shipra. And indeed, on the first point on whether the SDGs have been really translated into policy, I think also from our analysis and our research, we saw that there are some front-runner cities that are actually doing it. So the question is really more how to reach the one that they are not doing it, or either because they're not aware of the SDGs or because they don't have capacity or other issue, in particular maybe the smaller city perhaps. And in terms of youth, I think it's a really great point. And we saw in two of our pilots when we were working with the former Viken, now Akashus, there was this very interesting mechanism where the youth council were speaking and informing directly the policy makers, or even in Flanders, we saw the youth council going directly to the UN level political forum and present their priorities. So indeed, a great point. I think if there is nothing urgent, we can move to the second question. We can put the second question, Mana. So here is really the idea is to discuss which, beyond the topics, with concrete joint action all together we can put in place to accelerate the progress of the SDGs at the local level. For information, I think next week there will be a very important meetings also in Brussels, the European Commission UN dialogue on localizing the SDGs, and it's great that we can also contribute as OECD to shape very specific action between UN and European Commission on SDG localization. So if either Local 2030 or Audrey want to add something on that. But here is to really to get your feedback on which concrete action we should implement in the next, let's say, at least 2 or 3 years to accelerate the progress on the SDGs. As I was mentioning before, we have some ideas as OECD and UN Habitat and Local 2030 in particular, like the idea of maybe doing a stock take of lessons learned from the SDG localization experiences until now, and how this could also help to shape the post-2030 agenda that sooner or later we'll start discussing, or data, how to strengthen data. As OECD, we have been working a lot, as you know, on measuring progress on the SDGs in OECD countries. Now the idea will be to partner with the UN and to expand this also to all the UN member countries. So these are just some ideas, but we would like to really to hear from you what you think could be the key action that we should implement and prioritize in the next few years. I see AI here in the slide, citizens' ownership, political evidence, early education, monitoring, incentivized capacity building training. So again, as before, feel free to raise your hand and contribute to the discussion. Javier.
Thank you. Abusing of our time, sorry. But yeah, I think it's a lovely opportunity to share. So yeah, I think that building on what Shipra mentioned before, right, to the question about how to scale up a global, local, bottom-up, top-down movement, right, involving all the stakeholders. I think that communication is crucial, and that data is always, it's going to be the backbone of any transformation. But also, I think that building narratives and part of communication is going to be crucial. And for that, it's not only a quantitative approach to data, but also the qualitative approaches, narratives that can, let's say, can be convergent. They need to be recognized among peers, so that we build, let's say, a kind of a framework that can work like a router, so that territories can acknowledge which are the processes whatever is the context is going to be changing because it's locally addressed, but the processes that they need to face need to be interchangeable. They need to be recognizable among them, so that we can start scaling up experiences, solutions, technologies, data. So data need to be embedded in processes that, and bottom up, so that we can start scaling up solutions, right? And these narratives need to be using what Shipra was saying, communication skills that can touch the emotional part of citizens. I mean, we need to build emotions. I mean, the Nobel Prize understands that of economy knows that we are emotional and not rational decisions, right? We need to engage people in a positive emotional way. We need to have them on board, like you were saying. They need to own the agenda. There's to be ownership of the agenda, not only participation. And for that, we need to deploy all the tools that can touch this affective part. Art and data, culture, all the feeling of belonging to a collective process. And for that, the territory is going to be key, because territory, the feeling of belonging comes in a very natural way. So positive identities for long-term collective projects, I think that you can build strong narratives upon that and be exchangeable. Well, these some ideas to the scaling up opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. I think it's another great point. We have a lot of ideas on the screen. Anyone else that want to intervene and mention concrete action that you would like to see implemented by OECD or UN Habitat, the Local 2030? So here we have more impact studies, showcase achievement, making data simple, and this is what Shipra was mentioning before, share good practice, active participation, elderly education, political ownership, indicator at the local level, SDGs as a DDC criterion, that's another important point that we discuss, generate good narrative, set up UN, sit at the UN negotiation. I guess that's what, so the advisory group indeed. Jersey again.
Yeah, sorry, very quickly. There was this idea of creating this, because it's data, right? To create this repository of data that we all sort of have a little bit our hands on, like the Commission does, the OECD does, the UN does, the World Bank does. And then we are already a couple of stakeholders that we have quite some data, but it's not concentrated, which then leads to several fragmentations and so on. So maybe one joint action here would be that we sit on the same table, at least these institutions, and we provide the world with the evidence that is necessary for the progress of the SDGs. Hopefully the UN could take the lead on that one, but I'm sure that there is a lot of interest, at least on behalf of the Commission. Thanks.
Super. I think it's indeed a great idea, and something that we're already brainstorming between OECD and UN Habitat, and the GRC. We know the great work that you are doing on indicators for SDG localization. So something that maybe will emerge also next week at the meeting in Brussels. So if there is no other inputs on this point, Shipra, you want to add something?
Yes, thanks. Couple of things I think we are still, we should still focus on potentially ourselves. And this is in the spirit of brainstorming, hearing what's been being said. One, the political advocacy piece. I know we're coming to that in part 3 a little bit on the events, but I think we need a concerted effort, a stronger effort to towards political advocacy, whether we are talking about the G7, the G20 and others, join and think joining forces between Local 2030 and Habitat and OECD and others would be very important. The second thing I think we need to focus on, and that rests again between question 1 and 2, topic and action, is really mobilizing resources for upstream work. The you have a lot of money on the table, whether part of the Global Gateway or the banks or the climate funds, but where you don't have, where we are seeing cities don't have access to money is for the upstream activities, the planning, the capacity building, the evidence-based policy making, the data, the setting up of governance systems. We're seeing that that is what the money that is where the money dries up. And I think one joint action for us is to see how we can go to some of the bigger donors who are committed towards localization, committed towards SDGs, committed towards making the most of their investments, like the Global Gateway, and saying, you need to put a percentage of this, the banks, the IFIs, the national development banks. Jeannie mentioned in the morning the importance of those. Encourage them, work with them, support them, persuade them to put in a percentage of the investment money towards upstream preparatory grants and support to local governments. So that's my second piece that we're all grappling with that a little bit. A third, I think we need some serious, specific thematic work and research on the targets of the SDGs that are most lagging behind. We keep saying only 15% are on track, which means 85% are not on track. Out of this 85%, maybe 50% are stagnant, but 35% are backsliding. Which are the ones that are most at risk of falling off, and how can we have concerted strategies towards the achievement of those targets through localization, through local financing, through smart and innovative processes and digital technologies and AI and other tools that we have at our disposal. If we keep the conversation very generic around all 17 SDGs, all 169 targets, we will lose ourselves somewhere. But if we go very specific to those targets that are at risk, I think we can generate some important tools and information to go forward. So for me, those would be 2-3 points in this space.
Super. Really setting our agenda, Shipra. Thank you so much. This was from before, Iraklis? Oh. Okay, no other flags. So maybe we can go to the 5 minutes for the last question on events, how we can contribute to events and advocacy and outreach. Here we are mentioning some, the usual suspect, but this year will be very important, the high-level political forum as usual, but we have the Summit for the Future and the World Urban Forum that UN Habitat is organizing in November. So any ideas you may have on how we can contribute to this event, but more broadly, how we can strengthen advocacy, as Shipra was mentioning, to political advocacy to support the localization of the SDGs. We are both represented in the G7 urban working group presidency of Italy. So there we are also trying to include this dimension. There was a very important declaration from the Italian environmental communique of the G7 on the importance of localizing the SDGs and the need for a platform, or the fact that Italy will establish a platform for SDG localization. So these are just some ideas, but feel free to propose your ideas on that, or just simply also your plan for the level political forum and some of these events, the booth. And then we can 5 minutes, and then we can move to the closing remarks. I see evidence here.
Maybe to pick up a point on the events while people are thinking. Please, first let's give the floor.
Yeah, maybe I can just briefly say something, because from our experience, I think that, for instance, institutions like OECD or UN Habitat or ICLE, for you it's much easier, and you know the choreography of these events. I think as a city, as a poor not so conversant city. I mean, Bonn is somehow in these events, but still, I can only say we are ready, and we are ready to assist in bringing the message across. But I think we can only do that with the assistance of others. So I feel a bit overwhelmed by the question, how can we contribute? We can only signal that we are happy to do anything that could help to support the cause of the cities.
I think what we can do to add this as a next step in the follow-up develop up, we can do a mapping as a CD of the main events that are coming up and signal our participation and how you can contribute if you're there.
Yeah, I wanted to connect your point is very important, Verena, and I wanted to connect it to the word that came up, evidence and other things that are coming up. I think one is to support cities to navigate the choreography. The second is to make sure that we go to these events with very specific messages and specific evidence and specific case studies and examples. One thing we don't have here is, for example, COP. Now, we do go to the COP every year. The Local 2030 is present. We do have an event around localization. We have the COP ministers meeting. Again, ministers of urban development and housing are meeting at COP with the ministers of environment and climate. We do have the local and regional governments, or the cities day at COP. We do have the roundtable. So we have many mechanisms where local voices are being heard. Now, for example, at COP and high-level political forum. But if we go there, we should go there with very specific examples of the link between localization and that particular agenda under discussion. If we go with generic messaging and generic data, it doesn't get us anywhere. So part of the preparatory process with cities is to help them curate examples and information that they can take with impact to these platforms. That would be, I think, for me, very important. The two things that are not on this list, which we should start thinking about very early on, are the financing for development summit for next year. We talked about, Jeannie mentioned it, I think, in her presentation. Finance is the big question, finance is the big gap, finance is the big challenge, and subnational finance is still not on the radar. And I think that should be something we should all be preparing towards. And we should be using, again, bringing out evidence to talk about it. And the second is the World Social Summit, where a number of issues related to the just transitions, the SDGs that are being neglected, housing and other issues, very important to cities, will be brought up. So I think we should start thinking about now what do we take to these big events, which persuades the global community of nations to pay more attention and direct more resources to the local level. That is what we need.
Super. Thank you so much, Shipra. I think now we are running almost out of time. So what we are going to do as a CD, again, we'll consolidate all these messages, the Mentimeter and all the discussion, and prepare a possible roadmap for the next step. Now I would like to give the floor to the three key partners for the closing. Maybe we can start with Shipra and then Azir and then Aziza for some final closing messages.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I have spoken too much already, but I just want to say that this has really been a massive opportunity for us to partner on this roundtable and on this work. I think the more we can join forces together, the more we are able to advocate from everywhere, from the global to the local levels. I think our work is cut out. As I said in the morning, both on behalf of UN Habitat and on behalf of the Local 2030 Coalition, our doors are open. I hope that we can continue this discussion the next time at the Local 2030 Secretariat in office in Bilbao. But also, I would like to see as many as possible people at the World Urban Forum, where we're going to have a very large number and a wide array of topics to discuss exactly this broad theme on local actions for sustainable cities and communities. So just want to conclude with a big thanks and a call and an invitation to continue this partnership and continue this conversation with us. Thanks, Stefano, and thank you, Aziza, very much.
Thank you, Shipra. Now, Asian, for some final remarks.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Por mi parte, y en nombre del Gobierno vasco, única y exclusivamente agradecer a la OCDE.
As government, I would like to thank the OECD. Thanks both Aziza and Stefano. Thank you, Shipra. And for us, it's wonderful to be able to host this seventh roundtable of the OECD. This is a program we really believe in, and we want to share what we're doing in the Basque Country regarding the implementation of SDGs and the 2030 agenda. From our humble standpoint, we are trying to provide an action framework so that different stakeholders working in SDGs are able to get to meet each other and generate projects that can be scaled up in the future. We've talked today about how the Basque model has its foundations on 5 pillars. The first pillar is interinstitutional coordination. We believe this is a basic element to have good coordination between different levels, local to global. Of course, the engagement of the academia, universities, and research centers is fundamental. The same exact thing with the business world and the third sector or the social sector. And of course, the fifth element would be the citizens, the anonymous citizens that are not part of the institutions, nor academia, no businesses. And therefore, that's why we insist on the need of good dissemination, good communication, direct and targeted communication to the citizens so that they feel empowered and they feel ownership of SDGs and they continue with the transformation. I would also like to now speak about SDG 17 and alliances. We understand that this is not something that we can do by ourselves. So we contribute by working together with good alliances at different levels with OECD, Government of Spain, Local 2030. So being able to host the Secretariat of a UN Habitat and Local 2030 is wonderful for us because we're working on alliances, working together, Basque government and the Council of Bilbao, BBK Foundation, Spanish government, and UN Habitat. So we want to create networks and work in alliance and therefore to work from the good practices developed in the world, to learn from them and to be able to generate models at all levels, to be able to implement these good practices everywhere so that we all together learn and contribute to the fulfillment of the SDGs because they are all of our objectives. I hope you can also enjoy the city of San Sebastian because as the mayor said before, you're in a wonderful city as well as the Basque country. So I hope you can really enjoy this time you have here with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asier. And a final two-step conclusion. The first one, maybe to react on some of the ways forward that have been proposed and that I think hold amazing potential. And then I'll extend and add to the list of thanks. I think there was a point made by Stefano and Shipra about this proposal to work towards a global stocktake of where cities and regions stand vis-a-vis the SDGs, something that we're starting to think and to roll out that we hope to announce after having galvanized the related political support and financial support at the World Urban Forum and to develop, implement over the subsequent 2 years so that for the SDG Summit in 2027, we are able to provide this, one-stop shop overview of how cities and regions perform vis-a-vis the goals, the end values, where they stand, what is the distance that they still have to travel to get there, how they compare to their national average, how they compare to similar cities and regions in other countries, to similar cities and regions in their countries. That's the full data quantitative part that is very much enabled also with new sources of unconventional data and a lot of what we discussed during the AI session, but also geospatial satellite data at large help us now push a bit the frontier in this granular understanding of local and regional performance vis-a-vis the goals. But that's only a part of the story. What the stocktake is also aiming at is to draw lessons from, you know, a decade by then of localization efforts. And some of them actually are magnified by these voluntary local reviews processes, but there were actually VLRs even before the first VLR was put forward. And many of the exercises we've been doing also localizing the SDGs at local and regional level participate in this effort to, you know, open the books and use the goals as a way to rethink local policies and strategies, as a way to allocate budget, as a way to plan for the future, to prioritize investments. And I think there's a lot of the qualitative that is often scattered, atomized in dozens of databases and examples and case studies that would benefit from a bit of a synoptic view and stock-taking exercise. So I really think this stock-taking would be a major piece to actually, you know, shed transparency on where we stand, and that's my final word, connect to one of the recommendations in the word cloud that I found extremely interesting, which is foresight. Something that, based on what has been done for the past 12 years, because by 2027, that will be basically 12 years of implementing the SDGs. If we continue with this trajectory, you know, where are we going? And I think these kind of discussions on, you know, the cost of inaction or the kind of scenarios that are also being shaped now in countries like France, for example, adaptation to 4 degrees, you know, what does that mean? So I think this stocktake holds potential also to shape, you know, some foresight, and maybe why not, you know, inspire and guide the formulation of the follow-up to the Sustainable Development Goals and what the UN will put forward after 2030. So really invite you, you know, go home, have rest, take a breath, but try to see if this is making sense. And if you have suggestions, you know, we are between now and late October in a perfect momentum to adjust, revise, revisit the level of ambition, but we're not aware of anything similar being planned. And I really think this can be a major game changer to, you know, take stock, shed transparency on what has been done, draw pitfalls to avoid and lessons from what has worked or not worked, but also shape the way forward. And that foresight and post-2030 agenda is really inspiring for this purpose. So thank you very much for the inputs. Really huge thanks to all those that have attended in the room, but also online. Of course, big thanks to our colleagues and friends from the Basque country, Azir, and please to Jonan and to the Spanish authorities at large. You've been a champion from the onset, and also as the Basque country, you've opened the books, the black box of how you are working, and the dialogue that is ongoing. Keep an eye on it, because it's going to be very inspiring when it goes public, I think, towards the end of the year. It's not the end, actually, of the mission, because they're continuing to stay here 2-3 days, because on Friday they will have a full day of interview with different Basque stakeholders to advance a bit this pilot. And there are also in the room many cities and regions that have been pilots of the OECD in the past. We heard from the Secretary of Cordoba. We also have representatives from Paraná. We heard from Bonn. We have Rhine-Neckar also in the room. Flanders being represented as well. Akershus, that is now the new Viken name. And there are many of these places that have undergone this exercise of, you know, let's pause for a year and see how we've been doing things and what we need to change in the structure, you know, to make the most of this agenda for our own planning, investment, and strategic thinking purposes. So all these pilots will also continue to work tomorrow, because you have the full day for a steering committee meeting that will piggyback on some of the insightful suggestions we got today and shape the way forward. And then, of course, big thanks to Shipra. We as OECD from the onset have always said we hope to be the best supporting institution to the UN agenda. And I think it's been really a an amazing journey to work with UN Habitat amongst others, and to broaden that base, beyond SDG 11, and to make the case that local and regional governments have a role in all the sustainable development goals. I mean, this is something like 10 years ago, people were confining it to SDG 11, and that's pretty it. And I think you've been the champion for that mainstreaming of granular thinking and place-based in all sectoral SDGs. And I think it's been really a joy. And I'm delighted to see Local 2030 flourish, because I think it's an amazing hub of hubs and huge potential going forward. My last word goes to all those that have made this meeting, a smooth and fantastic hybrid test. This is the new normal, but believe me, we are very relaxed. It goes very well, but there are a few people that are not so relaxed and doing everything they can for it to go very well. We have, of course, in the room, all the colleagues in charge of the audio, the video, the camera. Please, thank you very much. Of course, the interpreters that have relentlessly, since this morning, especially with people like me that speak very fast, kept with the pace. Thank you all for making this available in the bilingual format. And then last but certainly not least, my team at the OECD. Those sitting at the table, you all know Stefano, the architect of this work. They're a fantastic team to work with, Aline and Lawrence. But there are also a few not sitting at the table and working very hard from Paris online. And I'm particularly thankful to Oscar, Mana, and I think Nicola has been also supporting technically. Thank you all very much. And with this, we close the meeting. We'll keep you informed of the next steps. And there is now a cocktail for those that can stay. Do enjoy the cocktail. I have to go and catch a train, but looking forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you very much. It's good that you reminded it.